the Pine Bluff Arsenal is not just a source of good, high-paying jobs for a lot of Arkansas families. It's really critical to our national security. The wars in Ukraine and Gaza over the last few years have revealed a brittleness to our defense industry and specifically munitions manufacturing, but making the basics of missiles and rockets and artillery shells and mortars. It didn't cause that brittleness. I think it just exposed it. So I've worked for years now to make sure that we're on a crash course to produce the kinds of munitions that our country needs to fight and win our nation's wars and therefore hopefully not have to fight them in the first place. Some answers will come from the defense industry, the private sector, like the production that we have here in Arkansas down outside of Camden. And we ship some of those munitions to our friends in Israel and Taiwan and elsewhere. But some of it's going to have to come from what the Army calls its organic industrial base, places like the Pine Bluff Arsenal that right now makes white phosphorus, which is a critical input for a lot of munitions, but could make a lot more. They have the land, they have the environmental permits, they have a skilled workforce, they have the facilities, they have the opportunity to expand. So in the early days of the new administration, there was some talk about perhaps contracting not just the Pine Bluff Arsenal, but other arsenals and depots and ammunition plants. I think through several meetings and conversations that Senator Boseman and Congressman Westerman and I have had with the Secretary of Army, Dan Driscoll, and the Army Chief of Staff, General Randy George, they recognize now that the organic industrial base, and specifically Pine Bluff Arsenal, is part of the solution. It's not outdated. It's not a relic. So I look forward to moving out on the order that they just issued that is going to try to explore ways to increase the production of munitions, not just at Pine Bluff, which is what we care most about here in Arkansas, of course, but at our organic industrial base across the country, because we really do have a munitions crisis.
Well, Senator, you raise a very important issue and point, and that is the skilled workforce. I mean, it takes time to learn this, develop these skills that are necessary, and if you're spinning up because of a major conflict, we usually don't have time to train all these people.
Yeah, it's a problem that's rife across the country. You see it in our shipbuilding, for instance, that pales in comparison to China's shipbuilding. One of the biggest bottlenecks, if you talk to the big shipbuilders, is things like skilled welders and electricians and metal workers and so forth. But in Pine Bluff, really throughout central Arkansas and south Arkansas, we do have a skilled workforce that is used to working in the defense industry, building munitions, handling what they call energetics, the things that go boom in missiles and rockets and artillery. And we want to build on that. We want to bring more young Arkansans into that industry, get them these good high-paying jobs, which are also contributing directly to our national security.
Absolutely. And that leads us to a perfect segue. Now, I know that you changed committees. You're now on the Senate's Energy and Natural Resources, and I think that's vital. Down in South Arkansas, they've discovered quite a bit of lithium, and then President Trump has made a big issue out of the Chinese are sending us a lot of these rare earth minerals we need for that defense production. And I consider Zelensky over in Ukraine unreliable at best, in spite of saying that Ukraine would help supply us. So what are your thoughts on developing that industry? And again, good paying jobs for Arkansans.
Yeah, these critical minerals, or sometimes they're called rare earth elements, are really vital to the modern economy, not just to our defense industry, but almost everything you might use or have in your daily life, your smartphone, your vehicle now, your kitchen appliances, your television, your computers, and what have you. Now, the good news is they're probably misnamed. They're not really all that rare after all. As you said, Steve, we have a huge lithium deposit in South Arkansas, one of the largest in the world. Almost any so-called rare earth element can be found in the United States, or at least among friendly nations. China doesn't have the market cornered because it's only present on Chinese territory. They have the market cornered because the United States and our friends have allowed them to get a monopoly on the production and the manufacturing of these minerals once they're actually mined. But we can do it here in the United States. We just have to make the choice to reverse stupid policy decisions over the last several decades to not only mine them here in the United States, but to process and manufacture them as well. Again, it's a key bottleneck in almost any modern advanced manufacturing, so it's something that we have to take advantage of.
And interestingly enough, Senator, that brings up two more points. I actually had Congressman Westerman on the show last week, and he raised his new bill to try to streamline the federal processing. And we talked about this. The need for electricity is more than doubling to support these AI facilities that are definitely the future and the present, for that matter. we don't have enough electricity. The last coal-fired plant that was built in Arkansas was back in 2010, so 15 years ago. And this was something that I raised with him, that one of the listeners raised with me. Our population in 1976 was approximately half of what it is now. We have not built a new refinery in the United States since 1976 to refine oil into petroleum products. And again, it comes down to the massive undertaking of permitting. Would probably take 20 years to just get it permitted, and a lot of money. And so this is a good thing.
Yeah, as President Trump sometimes says, we don't build stuff anymore. We don't build enough stuff. There's a small bridge on the George Washington Parkway from which you can see the Pentagon. And I mean, it's small. It's maybe 50 yards long. Since I've been in Congress, it took more time for our federal government to refurbish that bridge than it took them to build the entire Pentagon during World War II. Just to give you an example of how much delay there is through processing and permitting. So I strongly support permitting reform of the kind that Congressman Westerman has proposed in the House of Representatives, especially as it applies, as you say, Steve, to our energy industry. We need more energy. We need more electricity generating power to come online, whether it's coal, oil, gas, or nuclear. Nothing against solar or wind power, but they simply can't provide reliable and affordable base load power that we need for our homes, for our businesses, for our communities. So we need to streamline and make it easier and more faster and more affordable to build new power generation in this country. That's one of the rare places I think we might be able to get some Democratic cooperation, because as you say, Steve, we don't have enough for our current industry, much less power-hungry data centers and AI-related technologies. And even Democrats, who are generally hostile to new power generation, want to get some of that advanced manufacturing sited in their states. So I'm hopeful we can at least get some bipartisan cooperation on a permitting reform. Well, Steve, I think it was an apt phrase. I may start using it myself, spy land, because that's what most of this land is ultimately going to be used for. I think you also make a good point, and I make this point in my new book, 7 Things You Can't Say About China, is that the first and the worst victims of Chinese communism are the Chinese people. They're the ones who have faced brutal repression and murder and genocide for a century of Chinese communism. And we don't want to let Chinese communism gain any kind of foothold here in the United States. That's one reason why I've taken such a firm stand for years against things like Confucius Institutes on college campuses, or Chinese government's involvement in crafting K through 12 curriculum, or, as you say, Chinese purchases of U.S. farmland. China can't feed itself. That's a big strategic disadvantage for them. We shouldn't help them do a better job of more easily feeding themselves with our farmland. Furthermore, we shouldn't allow them to purchase farmland, which is always, it seems, curiously located right next to critical and sensitive sites, whether it's the Grand Forks Air Force Base in North Dakota, where they bought land outside of the base and really outside of what you would consider the Corn Belt, yet they were going to build a massive tower to mill corn that had lines of sight into the Grand Forks Air Force Base, or other purchases near strategic sites throughout the country. And I think we're reminded of especially how dangerous that threat could be when you see the drone strikes that Israel was able to launch against Iran from inside of Iran with pre-positioned drones, or that Ukraine was able to launch against Russia all the way over near the Pacific Ocean with pre-positioned drones.
They took out half of Russia's strategic bombing.
We simply should not allow China to own farmland, especially near critical or sensitive sites or military bases. You're right that our state has done a great job taking the lead here under Governor Sanders and Attorney General Griffin in our legislature, prohibiting such purchases. I've got legislation that would implement that kind of ban nationwide, because it's great for Arkansas, but we really need it nationwide to reduce the threat entirely.
Okay, that is very good to hear. And as both of us, you're a former soldier, I'm a retired one, that we know the importance of having a secure perimeter and security around our installations. I don't think President Trump would allow 2 spy balloons to transverse the entire United States. I think they would have been shot down off the coast. And how that could be allowed to happen is beyond me. So the one thing the Democrats were all against was the big, beautiful bill. And Senator, I told everybody it was every tax rate was going to go up all across the federal income tax spectrum. And I think that was so necessary. I think that would have shot us into an instant recession if that amount of drain went out of the economy. So as far as the big, beautiful bill goes, you guys passed it. No Social Security taxes, reduce the taxes on tips, and actually help working class Americans. What else did you guys do in that bill that you think are really? I know we're going to do that.
Well, it was very big and very beautiful, and there's a lot of measures in there that many Arkansans probably still aren't aware of. As you say, we stopped the largest tax hike in American history, and we cut taxes for almost all Arkansas families. Your tax rates are permanent now at the lower Trump rates. You have a bigger standard deduction. You have more credits for things like tithing to your local church. If you work, as you say, on tips or overtime, you get Social Security, you're likely to see a tax cut as well. There are important tax breaks for businesses so they can expand and create more jobs, for the energy sector, tax cuts, and also investments to make sure that we're creating more energy production here in the United States. John Bozeman included what I like to call the Bozeman Farm Bill, which included an updated risk management program for our farmers to give them a stable floor when prices are low and they still have sky-high input costs because of Joe Biden's inflation. Important steps on welfare reform to protect programs like food stamps or Medicaid for Arkansans who need it and not be wasting your tax dollars on illegal aliens or freeloaders or deadbeats who refuse to work even part-time. A generational investment in border security and immigration enforcement so we can finish the wall and continue to deport violent illegal aliens. A generational investment in our military for things like shipbuilding and aircraft and munitions that we need to deter Chinese aggression. So as you say, it was big and it was beautiful, and we just still probably barely touched the surface here.
Yes, and I agree with that. Now, two other things, and this is why it's so valuable, because I can tell you what I've got my fingers on the pulse beat of what a lot of the Arkansans are feeling in this state, and tell you this so you know how your constituents are feeling. And one thing is the U.S. budget deficit and the fact that we haven't had, I had Speaker Newt Gingrich on a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about, he was the last one when he and Clinton were in office to pass all the annual spending bills 4 times in a row, and they were balanced budgets as well, and we haven't had that since. And I know that's a source of frustration with these omnibus bills. So how is the progress going in the Senate on the bills?
Well, it's probably not going as fast as you and I would like, but it is going. If you look at the quarterly budget numbers or the monthly budget numbers, they've improved substantially over the first 7 months of the Trump administration. That's not surprising. You had the Democrats with 2 massive spending blowouts in 2021 and 2022. Now, they like to say the big, beautiful bill increased the deficit. That's not the case. The big, beautiful bill is going to reduce the deficit in the long run because we believe, proven out by history, that tax cuts ultimately create more tax revenue for the government. Yes. Because you have people spending money now rather than the government wasting it. You have businesses that are expanding and growing and hiring more workers, creating more taxpayers. That was the case in the first Trump tax cuts in 2017, in both of Ronald Reagan's major tax reform bills, in Bill Clinton's legislation that he passed with Newt Gingrich in 1997. You cut the tax rates, you see an increase in tax revenue. Unlike the Democrat spending bills, when you spend $1, you always spend $1. There's no savings on it. And usually, as happens, it costs a lot more than what was predicted at the time. That's what we've seen from their big spending blowouts in 2021 and 2022. So we didn't get into this hole overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight, but we're definitely moving in the right direction on the federal deficit, and I think that's going to continue for the next 3.5 years. There are some interim steps that I think we can take that will push out the dates that those trustees reports cited. That's when, not that they go broke, but when they start spending more money than they're taking in, which means you have to start using general tax revenues to supplement it. And obviously that's not a durable solution. So with Social Security, for instance, again, a growing economy that's healthy and strong and creating more employees is creating more taxpayers who are paying the payroll tax and paying into the Social Security Trust Fund. Most of Social Security is the old age part of Social Security, but a sizable amount, hundreds of billions of dollars, is disability. Disability was created for people who have permanent disabilities who cannot work and take care of themselves. Our country wants to do that. We don't want to allow disability fraud to encourage people not to work and just freeload off the government. So I've long proposed reforms that, again, would take modest steps to make sure that people who are on disability actually deserve it. And those steps over time can create hundreds of billions of dollars of savings for Social Security. In the Medicare program, you're seeing the impact of medical inflation more generally. So getting inflation under control is helpful there. Also, some of the steps that the president has taken working with Congress to try to reduce medical inflation specifically among pharmacy benefit managers or hospitals or insurance companies, I think can help address it as well. The strongest thing, though, for Social Security and Medicare, like reducing the deficit in general, is a strong, healthy, growing economy, which I'm confident the big, beautiful bill and President Trump's deregulatory steps is going to help contribute to.
I do. And I will give you a tip that you can use on your two friends from California, Senator Adam Bolshiff and little Alex that picks on women, Padilla. I had a listener, believe it or not, I got listeners all over the country, I guess from being a veteran in the organizations and my brothers and sisters that I serve with, we get a lot. Toby even said I had 3 up in Alaska. But one of the guys from Los Angeles texted me, and he told me something that was incredible. 26-year-old guy. They call it couch surfing out there. He's getting Medicaid for his health insurance and getting SNAP or food stamps for his substance, and all he wants to do is surf. And so he also surfs at night. He goes and stays at different family and friends' houses, and he's perfectly content with this lifestyle and not working. And we, the taxpayers, are subsidizing a 26-year-old that should be working.
And we should not be doing that. Able-bodied grown men and women should be working. And if they're not working, they should be going to school, maybe raising a family full time, but they don't need to just be what you call couch surfing. And again, the big, beautiful bill takes a lot of steps in that direction on welfare reform of programs like food stamps on Medicaid. For that matter, one thing we didn't talk about, as I said, we just touched the tip of the iceberg, is student loan reform, making sure that student loans are not underwriting a layabout graduate student lifestyle of kids staying in college or school and getting graduate degrees into their 30s on programs that aren't going to create good jobs for them. So there's a lot of steps that we took in the big, beautiful bill that recognize the basic American principle that if you're an able-bodied grown man or woman, you need to be working. And if you're not working, you should be in school working towards a productive degree that's going to help you to contribute to our society or raising a family full-time.
Absolutely. And Senator, I had this idea, and I don't know if anybody's ever floated this to either side, the House or the Senate. But I know most people don't want their Social Security money to go into the stock market. You know, their retirement funds, yes. But I had a suggestion last week that if the Social Security trustees, and this will solve twofold problems, government bonds, and I'm talking municipal and county and state bonds, are very safe. They're backed by usually sales tax. You know what the revenue is when the bonds come out. And we have a definite problem with infrastructure in this country. If the trustees for Social Security and Medicare were allowed to look at and do their due diligence and just do this into municipal, county, and state bonds, we get a source of interest coming off the investment that helps shore up these funds, and it's a relatively safe investment. And then we also get the benefit of public infrastructure.
Yeah, unless they're investing in California or Illinois or Chicago bonds, right?
Yeah. Or I might add, and they crashed my computer on this. Pete Buttigieg gave Mayor Frank Scott Jr., affectionately known on this show as Mayor Mayhem, money to study to build a deck park across I-30 when he could have just asked the Highway and Transportation Department, hey, leave one of those spans over the river. That would be much better to have a deck park with some aesthetics rather than your hot dog and diesel particulates. So there's a lot of people think that's a huge waste of money. Okay. So, Senator, one last thing. We talked tariffs and everything else, and the other is crime. And the crime being that President Trump has taken drastic steps in D.C., federal city, and the murder rate was 0 for the last 2 weeks. First time that's happened in almost 70 years. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that we have a unique responsibility in Washington, D.C. to make it a safe, livable city, not just for the residents of Washington, but for the thousands of Arkansans who visit every year. Arkansas grandparents should be able to take their grandkids to the Smithsonian and to the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, and Arlington National Cemetery without fear of being mugged or carjacked or accosted by a homeless lunatic or being overpowered by the smell of weed on the streets. That's what you had until about 2 weeks ago in Washington, D.C. The National Guard in Washington, D.C. is unique because there's not a governor there, and there never will be because Washington, D.C. will never be a state. The National Guard of Washington, D.C. answers directly to the Secretary of the Army, who obviously answers ultimately to the President. But it's not just the D.C. National Guard that's in Washington, and they're not primarily providing the enhanced law enforcement. It's federal law enforcement agencies like the Park Police and the DEA and Homeland Security Investigations and the FBI. These brave men and women are doing the work that the D.C. Police Department, in many cases, was not allowed to do by the D.C. politicians. This has happened in other cities. In Los Angeles, the National Guard had to be mobilized by President Trump to protect immigration agents, to enforce immigration laws. I know a lot of liberals in D.C. are complaining that they see National Guard at the train station or outside restaurants. Steve, you've probably been in the train station in New York. They've had National Guard walking the train station there since 9/11.
Yes.
And nobody ever complained about that or felt that it was intimidating or anything else, but rather an important crime-fighting and terrorism-fighting step. So what President Trump has done in Washington, D.C. is long overdue. And if some of these Democratic cities don't allow their police to act effectively police and judges don't get serious about cracking down on crime, I do think that the federal government has a basic responsibility to provide a backstop of public safety and law and order for all Americans, even if their Democratic mayors won't do so.